What if you're about to make some simple mistakes which will end up costing you thousands of dollars? Mistakes that, when I made them, cost me 3 weeks worth of work and thousands of dollars in revenue. In fact, they hit me so hard that to this day, I've still not made that money back. So to avoid you ending up like me, in this video, I'm going to reveal what these big mistakes are, how to know you're making them, and most importantly, the simple solution that will fix all of these mistakes that every editor needs. But first, what exactly are these big mistakes? Well, to tell you that, I need to take you back to the end of 2015. I had just finished uni and started full-time freelance editing, and I'd landed a job working with an independent videographer. I had done some previous work for him, from editing commercial and corporate videos here and there, but this time, it was to edit a music video. It was short notice, they were looking for an editor, and they wanted to get started pretty fast. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but taking on this project ended up being one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made as an editor. But what exactly happened that caused me to lose thousands of dollars, and what can you do to avoid that? Well, to start, the gig turned out to be pretty easy. Editing went smoothly, and I managed to get a cut to the client pretty fast. However, it wasn't until the review stage that I realized just how much of a mess this would become. You see, I wasn't working with just one client, I was working with two. I had my main contact who actually hired me for the project, but he also had his client who was the one who paid for the music video. Now, normally this isn't an issue, as you'd have one point of contact to collect all the feedback and make life simpler for the editor. But not only did my client have feedback, their client did too. So I had to juggle twice as many revisions and changes to the edit, meaning it took me even longer to get the work done. Now, how can editors safeguard themselves against situations like this? Because if you don't, you're going to end up making changes for a project that will never get finished and end up losing more money every hour that goes by. If you want to stop the project from going on forever, you need to set a limit on how many changes and revisions the client is allowed to have. Typically, it's between 2 to 3 rounds of changes, and if they want any more after that, you charge them your hourly rate on top. You can say something like, okay, I can do those changes for you, but as it's outside of the revision limit, it will incur a rate of X dollars per hour to make those changes. When you do that, it sets reasonable expectations and boundaries that keeps you safe from situations where the client keeps asking for changes. It also keeps things professional, because you don't want the client wasting your time by constantly tweaking everything that you do. But what do you do if you're working with multiple clients and they all want changes? Well, it's important that feedback doesn't come from more than one person. So having a point of contact is extremely important. It's this person's job to collect and provide all of the feedback and make sure the clients all agree on the changes that they want. You don't want Harry wanting more upbeat music and then Sally wanting relaxed music. Those kinds of changes are only going to want to make you pull your hair out and regret your career decisions. But the mistakes don't stop there, and as time went on, this project only got worse. Do you remember being a kid and playing an imaginary game with your best friend, and each time something happened to them, they would change the story on the spot? You could be playing something like a shooting game, and you would be winning until they suddenly shout, "Force field," and you change your gun to shoot through their force field, and then they shout, "Double force field." So you change your gun again, and then they'd shout, "Triple padlock, double force field," and it makes you think, screw this. You feel like you've been lied to and cheated a little because they keep changing the goalposts. Well, this happens way too many times in video editing too, except there's money on the line and it's not as fun. Now, all of the changes and revisions I had to do created a compounding effect on the edit that created another problem, and it led to something that's usually a result of poor planning in the pre-production phase of a project. Their client wanted further changes that weren't outlined or specified in the original brief. They wanted changes to the length of the music video to make it longer, make it shorter. Then they wanted to add graphics and animations that weren't there to begin with. This is called the scope, and it's like being a hitman with a sniper rifle. You got your scope aimed in on a single target in the shopping mall, and you've been told that that's the target that you need to hit. And just as you're about to pull the trigger, a call comes through and you find out the target has moved and they're actually in their bath at home. But you've already done all of the work to set up and take out the first target, that all of that time and effort has gone unpaid. And just like our imaginary hitman, editors can also be affected by scope creep. And if not handled the right way, can cost you time, money, and make it hard to accurately assess how long you've been working on each project. You then end up pouring more hours into a project that you didn't quote for, hours that could be spent working on other projects that can make you more money. So how do you prevent this from happening to you? Well, to start, it's important to communicate everything to the client. You need to break down your process, the expectations of the project, and the implications of what will happen if the scope changes. And you need to stick to your guns and not let things slip through like I did. So, how do you do that? Well, there's a simple solution, and it's having a scope of work document that you can refer to if and when the project changes. This document is essentially your rules or guidebook for the project, and it outlines things like what the project actually is, the deadlines, the deliverables the client are expecting, what the client should provide, how many changes and revisions they are allowed, and anything else you might discuss that could impact the project being completed on time. But most importantly, it highlights the fact that anything outside of what's in that document will incur charges and may affect the schedule of the final product. Now, mid-project scope changes are pretty common, and it's perfectly normal for your client to want to do a few extra changes. But it's also perfectly normal for you to charge for them, and being prepared for that before entering a project means you won't have any unexpected surprises. At least that's the idea. But this isn't the only thing you need to do to protect your money, because my biggest mistake is something that still haunts me and my wallet to this day. Because you can make it crystal clear about how much feedback you will take and ensure your client understands the scope of the project, but if you don't do this one thing, then like me, you could still lose thousands of dollars. As the project got started right away, there was very little time to put the right safeguards in place. Now, this is totally my fault. I had just come out of uni, and working with clients was still relatively new to me at the time. And since then, it's become something I always warn editors about. Because if you don't do this one thing, it can end in catastrophic results, which is exactly what happened to me. Don't worry, because I'm going to give you something at the end of this video that's going to save you so much pain and help you avoid the worst mistake you could possibly ever make. With this music video and the constant changes and scope adjustments, it turned into a 3-week job. Now, when I initially priced it up, I quoted it to be done in around 10 days, and when I was done, it ended up being around $1,200. So I sent off my invoice, and 30 days later, I still didn't have my money. Now, I won't go into the details, but it turns out the job ended up being something that sent my client into a bit of financial trouble, meaning the work I put into the project was all for nothing. And it meant that I was unable to get my money because I'd forgotten the most important thing that every editor needs to do: get a signed agreement. I know, it's a rookie mistake, and it's one that ended up costing me all that time and revenue. But since then, I've learned the single most greatest thing that any editor can have in their arsenal is an agreement or contract ready to go, especially if your client doesn't provide one, because then it's on you to do something that protects your time and money. So, how do you get one, and what does it need? Now, it does depend on where you are in the world and what legal details you need to include, but the essential element of a contract or an agreement should absolutely outline things like who the actual parties are involved in the project, the scope of work we mentioned earlier, a project timeline with milestones and deadlines, your payment terms as well as late payment fees if the client doesn't pay on time or not at all, who owns the copyright and intellectual property, and if you're able to display the work as part of your portfolio, things like confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements, along with what will happen if there's an unforeseen circumstance and the project gets cancelled for any reason. And obviously, a place to sign everything. Now, contracts and agreements are scary things, especially if you're new to freelance editing, which is why I'm going to provide a solution and give you a template that you can use for your own projects. Now, I'm not a legal expert, so make sure you get it checked in your part of the world before you start using it. It's designed to be simple and protect you from making the same mistakes that I made when I first started. But the thing is, even if you manage to dodge all of these mistakes, there's still one thing that's going to stop you from making any kind of money, and that is by not having a system to actually bring in clients, which is why you need to watch this video next to learn the system that I use for years to find multiple clients for my video editing business.